Thank you for joining today's Teaching with Technology Brown Bag session. Unleash your data, no-code dashboards for modern educators. Our presenter today is Colonel Joshua Duncan, who is the Assistant Dean for Assessment in the School of Medicine at USU. Here are our goals for today's session.
So let's first touch on meeting accreditation requirements. So LCME and ACGME have a variety of different standards, and dashboards can help with the surveillance that is required for all of the curricular activities and for monitoring outcomes. For example, LCME's Standard 8, where we're looking at curricular management. You can use AI or you can use dashboards to help generate some of the tables that are required for reporting purposes. You can monitor integration across the curriculum. One of the things that a lot of software does, especially in the GME world, where we have milestones that are consistent across residency programs, as some of those applications have built-in radar graphs or other ways of benchmarking milestones. And we can do the same for undergraduate medical education as well, though that requires us sometimes to build our own dashboards because that's not always integrated into those existing systems. Regarding technical integration, these are becoming increasingly accessible now that you too can be a coder without any coding experience. The hottest coding language is English, which makes it a lot easier to build connectors, which are ways of automating connection. So you can import data into Google Sheets here at USU, or you can import data into Excel spreadsheets or Access databases if you're using a Microsoft product through these application programming interfaces. So it's just a way to automate the import of that data. You can blend data. So the product that we'll show today, Looker Studio, actually does that automatically, where you used to have to do these joins and you could only have up to 5 data sources. Now you can have almost unlimited number of data sources. You can have at least 100 different data sources that you can join as long as you have a common column name across those data sources. You can also do calculated fields in these dashboarding tools. And you can think of that as having like an Excel formula. So if you want to add two things together or take an average or concatenate them if it's text, you can do that just like you would be able to do in Google Sheets or in Excel. You can do that in different dashboarding platforms as well. So effective data visualizations. We will show you some of what we do here at USU. We have a set of learning analytics dashboards with different views to include student views so they can only see their data, faculty views, and then de-identified views, which I'll show you today, that our competency and entrustment committee use when they are reviewing students. For most of those charts, we have time series, so we can plot trajectories. We can look at exam performance over time. We can look at clinical skills development for a variety of entrustable professional activities. We can look at how students are trending with each of those over time. And this helps us to identify learners who are at risk or need additional academic support. Similarly, for QA and QI activities, maybe one of the examples that we have in the ACGME world is mapping competency attainment for each of the learners. So you can look at development of those skills over time, and then this can help inform some of the programmatic activities that you have in GME. Touching on governance and privacy. So depending on the data that you're using, we don't have this yet at USU, though we hope to in the future, use data from the electronic health record. This can require BAAs to ensure that we have HIPAA compliance. You also have to make sure that that data is stored where you can house PHI, which is our current rate limiting step for using some of this data for learning analytics. We also want to make sure that data is de-identified to the greatest extent possible. If we don't need to have learner level data when we're trying to make programmatic decisions, we can use de-identified tags for each student rather than having their actual names. We do some predictive analytics here at USU. So this can require just thinking about the algorithms that we are using. Just as many of you are probably hearing as you're using AI is trained on basically the entire internet and may represent the biases of the entire internet. So depending on the types of models that you're using, may have some inherent biases built into them as well. We use traditional machine learning, so some multiple linear regression and logistic regression models to help identify learners at risk. So we're using explainable AI as our way of having that algorithmic oversight. We also want to ensure that users and providers of the data that we're reviewing have psychological safety. They're able to provide quality feedback when they know it's anonymized, and that way we have trust between trainees and faculty. And we'll show you a quick example of just one of the ways that data is collected, in this case from GME. You can also use dashboards for curriculum management. Variety of different things that you can do here. We're integrating new things into the curriculum. For example, we're integrating AI into the curriculum. For this case, I gave tropical medicine exposure. Maybe we want to introduce some new modules into that, and then we can study the performance trends over time of different class cohorts as we integrate this. And then we can act to ensure that we are enacting the most high impact changes as part of that continuous quality improvement process. So we'll show you some of the data that could help inform some of those decisions based on what we collect. All right, so let's get hands on now. I want to show you first a few examples of different dashboards, and then we'll actually build a dashboard together with a synthetic data set, and I'll show you what that data looks like. Just to show you some use cases, how this might be helpful for curricular development. So we have a longitudinal assessment subcommittee here at USU that mapped all of the assessments to our educational program objectives. And that allows us, since this all lives in a Google Sheet, we can connect that to a dashboard. And now we can look at all of the different assessments that we have for a given objective. So if I want to look at just this educational program objective, it will filter it, allow us to see what those assessments are, and when in the curriculum that occurs. So you can imagine how that can be helpful. So this was an effort led by Dr. Rebecca Cole. We also have curricular maps. So while we use MedHub as our curricular map, sometimes we want to have, rather than going and digging through multiple reports, maybe we want to look at all of those together. So we can put that all into a sheet, and then this can give us a better snapshot of what our curriculum actually looks like in a way that the tool that we're using may not be able to do itself. So this allows us to do things like search for different content. If we want to look for objectives and we're looking for mitochondria, we can find all the sessions that are related to that. Allows us to quickly navigate this, and you can just imagine how this could be helpful. We can also take this sheet and use AI, and now we have a custom chatbot through which we can ask questions. So it can be very powerful, just using some basic tools and free tools that are accessible to many of us. For evaluations, we do this extensively for our medical students. One of the use cases that we have in GME do similar things where residents will provide reviews of their rotations. And this can help inform decisions that are made for the residency program for attainment of those milestones, what opportunities are actually available at each of those rotations. And this is for the preventive medicine residency, where residents provide feedback. And then the program director and associate program director can make data-driven decisions about where they want to take the residency. For our NBME exams, I think one of the opportunities that I really love about dashboards is it takes those comma-separated values that are reports that are generated by NBME. So text files is how they, by default, open up. You can turn that into a dashboard and do some really powerful analytics, especially when you combine thousands of these reports into a single spreadsheet. In addition to looking at things like exam performance over time for an individual module, we can look at individual items since they provide performance by individual question mapped to the USMLE content. You can see how students have performed compared to the national average, and we can use this to help shape our curriculum. students are underperforming in a particular area, that might prompt us as faculty members to go back and look at that curricular content and how we're assessing it. For our learning analytics dashboards, this is a shared mental model that we have for our students, for our faculty coaches, for our competency and entrustment committee, and for our module and clerkship directors too. They can use this to help identify opportunities to improve curricular content and improve clinical opportunities for students. Orient you just to a couple of things because these will be relevant for our hands-on here in just a couple of minutes. So in the pre-clerkship curriculum, we use Canvas as our learning management system. There are a variety of canned reports that come from Canvas. One of those is weekly activity. So we can look at student page views. This is a proxy for student engagement, the number of times that they are clicking on things within the learning management system, and participations, the number of times that they're hitting a submit button for an assignment or a quiz or a discussion board post, etc. We can look at exam performance over time, and you can have some trend lines. So we'll replicate this with some canned Canvas reports today. We do some predictive analytics that use sheets and some functions within sheets to build some models to help us identify learners at risk. So we have some descriptive analytics. We have some predictive analytics, and then you can have prescriptive analytics too. So since we blueprint individual exam questions to the USMLE content outline, we can track individual student performance. So in this case, I have a de-identified student here, and I can see all 1,339 USMLE content concepts that were assessed in the pre-clerkship curriculum. And in this case, this learner got 26% of these questions correct. And if they want to go back and help fill in those knowledge gaps as part of prescriptive analytics, we can build dashboards that under the hood, it's just a Google Sheet, but it contains a URL to a resource that we use here at USU. And that will go out and search for content in this case, AMBOSS, one of the resources that our students have, and it will look at that and help point them in the direction where they can help fill those knowledge gaps, do assessments with bank questions. In the clerkship, one of the things that is closely assessed by our competency and entrustment committee are the clinical skills development of each learner. So our learners are expected to get one direct observation or one workplace-based assessment each week. And whichever faculty member is assessing them, they don't have to assess all aspects of the history and physical and the management plan, but whatever they do assess, we ask them to observe. They do this through SurveyMonkey, and then we have a connector to a Google Sheet that feeds this dashboard, and I'll show you a representation of what that looks like once it makes it to a Google Sheet, and then we'll actually build one of these charts so you can see how that works. But we can look at trends over time, and this can be very helpful as we're doing surveillance of the cohort. Each class is reviewed multiple times by our competency and entrustment committee, and this allows us to reach out to learners who may need additional support. And that may be giving them opportunities for additional clinical skills development or encouraging them to focus their workplace-based assessments on particular aspects of those entrustable professional activities on particular tasks. So those are some use cases of how we use dashboards here at USU. I want to next shift to actually building some dashboards. So I want to show you under the hood at what a data set might look like. And we'll go through a few different canned reports. So this is all synthetic data that I am showing you. So this is Canvas weekly activity. So there's a report that comes out of Canvas that contains all of this data, and it is named by the week that you are downloading it. We add just a couple of additional columns onto this data. So in this case, we have 10 students. We're looking at their page views and participations over time. We gave them some email addresses. So this is how, when email addresses are included, this is how you can build authentication into your dashboards to where students can only view their data. This is called row level security. So student A can only ever view things that their email address allows them to view. This is what a Canvas report would look like. And then we'll turn this into a chart in just a minute, but I want to show you two other data sources first. So assessments are something that can be downloaded from the Canvas grade reports. And in this case, I'm just stacking it. So each time students are taking an exam, in this case, I am presuming that there are weekly quizzes. We don't always have weekly quizzes across our modules, but let's say we wanted to trend quiz performance over time. So we capture that through Canvas, and these first several columns come directly from Canvas. We turn these into percentages, z-scores, and then capture the email addresses and class as well to build additional filters into our dashboards. I want to highlight just a couple of things, especially as we look at these two data sets. We want to be able to build filters in our dashboard. Say we wanted to filter by student. We would just want to make sure that that name is the same in all of the tables that we're using. If we want to be able to filter by class, we want to make sure that that name is the same too. So let's take a look at our weekly activity. And in this case, we have two different names. We want to make sure that student uses that same name structure, which it does. It's student A, student B. And then we want to use class to make sure that we have that structured the same across our data sources too. So we'll be able to filter now by class and by student. Another thing that you saw is we do workplace-based assessments. So this is, again, synthetic data that we would be capturing through SurveyMonkey surveys that the faculty fill out. They pick a student to review. They provide some information, like their role as a faculty member is, what department they work in, where they work, context in which they were doing the direct observation. And then they pick a variety of different behaviors, but under the hood, we turn those behaviors into numeric values based on the AAMC's Entrustable Professional Activity Toolkit, where behaviors that require corrective action are assigned a 0, all the way up to the entrustable behaviors that we want to have all of our students exhibit as they are transitioning to GME. We assign a value of 3. So it's sort of like a GPA, takes those behaviors and turns them into numeric values that we trend over time. So kind of the same thing that we saw before. If we want to be able to filter by student, we just need to make sure that those column names are the same. So we have a student column name. We also have a class column name. And now let's use this to build a dashboard. So we have 3 different data sources here. And we're going to go to lookerstudio.google.com. This is available to us at USU. If you are at an MTF and do not have access to our Google Workspace, there are other dashboarding platforms which they all work more or less the same. You can connect to different data sources, and you can use that data to build visualizations. So Power BI is something that is approved, and I can actually get free versions on your desktop if you're at an MTF. If you use things like the MHS dashboard, that's Power BI. We also have a lot of reports that are built with Click and with Tableau. So under the hood, they all work basically the same. So you're connecting to some raw data underneath, and then you're building visualizations on top of that. So I'll show you what this looks like with Looker Studio. I would say the easiest thing to do is, because it's very sustainable, is downloading the reports manually. You don't have to do this every day if you're just doing this episodically. It's probably the fastest way and most consistent way to do it. It's just download the reports. There are features within Google Sheets. It has AppScript where you can write code. This does require a little bit of vibe coding, which I feel like would be another teaching with technology session. You can do some vibe coding to automate that, where it uses the application programming interface. So it gets a little more technical, but you can automate these data extractions from Canvas into Google Sheets. using AppScript. But I generally do this manually. I have a few things that are automated, like pulling in data for our workplace-based assessments. We have that automated. All right, so Google Sheets, I'm going to connect to these 3 different data sources that we just looked at. So we're going to look at the Canvas weekly activity. We want that first row as headers. That's the column names. And then I don't have any filters applied, but we would want to include hidden and filtered cells. So I'm going to add that. So that is added to my report. I am going to add a couple of other data sources too, and then we'll use these to build our visualizations. So I went to resource and add data sources. So depending on the roles and permissions, how your account's provisioned at USU, you might be able to connect these by yourself using Looker Studio. If you do not automatically have this, you may have to put in a Google ticket for them to enable the Google Drive API that basically allows the connection between Looker Studio and Sheets. So we're going to go back to Google Sheets and we're going to add the assessments table that we just looked at. Add that to the report. And we're also going to add those workplace-based assessments using that first row's header. So same default settings there. So if your sheet is set up to pull data in automatically, you can actually set the refresh frequency for each of these data sources. I'll show you what that looks like. So let's say we have our workplace-based assessment set up to pull in data automatically. As we do, I can edit that and then I can refresh that every 15 minutes if I wanted to. So that would refresh the dashboard every 15 minutes. I don't really have a need to do that. So no need in using compute when I don't need to. So I'm going to change that to every 12 hours in this case. But that does exist if you have a need for fresher data. So if we are wanting to replicate what we saw on the Learning Analytics dashboard, where we're looking at time trends for Canvas page views, and looking at summative exam performance over time, let's go ahead and do that. A variety of different charts. So these are just drag and drop, as you may be able to see on the screen here. I'm gonna make that a little bit bigger. In this case, we're going to do a time series chart. And the data source that we want for this, we have 3 data sources to choose from. So if we're going to do the weekly activity, let's pull that in first. That doesn't look anything like what I really want to see. And here I can pick my x-axis. That is what I want on the x-axis. I want the date. On the y-axis, I don't want the number of records that we have. That's the number of students that are reported per week, which is 10. What I do want are the individual page views. And if I'm looking at the class as a whole, right now it's just summing them up. That's probably less helpful than reporting the average. So I can report the average just by clicking on this little pencil here. I can change how the number is formatted. I can change how it's aggregated too. So I'm going to just do the average there. So this is not really what I wanted either, because every day that nothing's being reported, it goes down to 0. Really, I just want to see points here. So I can change how this looks as well. I'm going to go over to Style, and we can give this a title. So let's call this Page Views Over Time. That's fine. We can leave that as Page Views Over Time. Maybe I want to bold that and center it. Let's go back to this chart here. And if I want to show points, I can come down to that series. So what it's displaying right there, I can have it show points. And I want to get rid of all these points that are zeros. So that option is down. I have missing data. So right now it does align to 0. If I do linear interpolation, it just draws a line between each dot. And that's really what I wanted to see. So I want to connect the dots of observations that we actually have. If I had some sort of reference line I wanted to include, we can do that. Or if we wanted to see trends over time, may or may not be helpful in this case, but we can add trend lines looking at a linear trend. Now we have a simple linear regression model that is running in the background that shows you that faint line showing you trends over time in the back. All right, so now we have page views over time. This is looking at the class as a whole. Let's add another chart too. Let's add exam performance over time. We're going to use a different data source this time. So we're going to add chart, also a time series chart. And this one is, we're going to go back to our setup. We're going to pick our assessments. We have date on the x-axis. That's what we want. On the y-axis, it's again defaulting to record count, so the number of students that are reported each day. We're going to turn this into the percentage. That's what we really want to report. Now it's summing the percentage, so we don't want to know sums of all of those. We want to know the average performance for the class as a whole. It's displaying this as a number from 0 to 1, so I can change that formatting. The data type, go to numeric. I can change that to a percent, and now it's reporting percents like we want. So I can change the style of this one as well. So we can say quiz performance, since this is looking at weekly quizzes in our synthetic data set. So quiz performance over time. Do the same thing here. We want to show points. Maybe we want to add a linear trend line. And we want to do linear interpolation. So anytime there are missing values, we'll connect the dots that we actually have. All right, so we can see maybe there's some sort of association there between page views over time and quiz performance over time. We're looking at the class as a whole. Maybe now we want to break this down by individual student. So we can add controls, which are filters, to do this. So if I add a control, got lots of different options here. In this case, maybe I just want a drop-down list where I can pick the student. So it's defaulting to assessment date. As long as we have the same column name across data sources, student, it does automatic joins now. So we don't have to blend the data manually. So I can pick really any of the data sources. We'll keep it with assessments, but our control field now will be student. If I wanted to report a metric, like the number of records that we have for each student, we could have that. But in this case, I don't really want anything, so I'm just going to get rid of that. I can change the way this is sorted. Maybe I want to sort my students alphabetically, so I'm going to do that. So it's going to be alphabetical ascending. So now it is student A through student J. So while we have class performance as a whole here, when we added this filter, this now allows us to look at individual students. Now I can look at just student A. Maybe I'll pull it over here so you can see it change. I can look at just student B, just student C. Maybe I want to look at a group of students. Maybe a couple of students have the same faculty coach or the same small group leader, and I want to compare them to the rest of the class. So I can group students really however I want. If I want to look at different cohorts. So now we're able to look at two different data sources that are sliced with a single filter. So pretty cool. I'm going to reset all those filters. With our remaining time, we're going to add one more data source just to see how this could be useful and give you an idea for how we built that learning analytics dashboard that has multiple data sources. We have a couple dozen data sources for that. We're going to add one more chart. We're going to add a time series chart, and this time we're going to look at workplace-based assessments. We're going to change our data source to workplace-based assessments. In this case, we're going to look at, on the y-axis, we want to look at history and physical exam performance. So we're going to look at history. We don't want to sum that. We want to take the average of that when we're looking at multiple students together. And let's say on the same chart, we also want to look at physical exam. So we'll add physical exam there too, taking the average of that. That's kind of noisy when you're looking at the class as a whole. It's also going back to 0, and we don't want it to do that when we just want to connect the dots. Let's do what we've done before. We want to show the points for, this does it by series. So we're looking at the history as series 1, physical exam as series 2. We can pick a trend line there if we want. Let's, in this case, skip the trend line. And same thing for series 2. We'll show points there. Missing data, we want to do linear interpolation. All right, now we want to add a little bit more context to this. So if we wanted to use that EPA toolkit and highlight in early developing versus late developing behaviors, we can do that in the setup too. There are a variety of different ways to do that. In this case, we want to add a reference band. So let's say we want to have early developing be represented, and we want this to begin at 0.5 and end at 1.5. And maybe we want the color here to be yellow. Now we have a band here. We can add another reference band for late developing. Why that go from 1.5 to 2.5. And then let's give that a color of green. And we'll have one more band. I call this untrustable. And we'll have this go from 2.5 to 3. And let's have this be blue. So now we can resize this however we want to. But now we're able to filter this by student too. But let's say we also want to add some narrative data. So I'm going to add a table. The chart that I picked there was just a regular table. Let's use that workplace-based assessment data. Maybe we want the date included, that's fine. But let's say what we want to report is the narrative feedback they get about what they can do as next steps. And actually, that is not what I want. That's a dimension rather than a metric. So metrics are numbers. Dimensions are going to be the words that are included within those cells. So now we have a nice table here. We can resize this. We can set this up to wrap so we can view that a little more easily. Now we have a nice dashboard that includes 3 different data sets. If I want to filter by student, look at just student A's performance. This will filter their page views over time, their quiz performance over time, their workplace-based assessments over time, and then we can look at narrative feedback as well. So you can extend this, you can add multiple different pages to include a variety of different data. You can have it set up to where a single filter will filter all of the pages as well. But hope that this started to unlock the realm of possibility. We touched on how this can be used to help meet accreditation standards, help support some of those data-driven decisions as part of your QA, QI activities. Thinking about some of the security that we have here, if we wanted to, let me just show you what this looks like. If we wanted to have row-level security to ensure that students could view only their data, the way that we do that is in our data sources, we can filter by email, and then we just pick whichever email field we have. So we had an email field in each of our data sources. And now this should make it to where I can't view the assessment data because my email address was not included in that. So now the quiz performance over time, I don't see anything. That's what students would see too. Their data is not included. They would not see that quiz performance over time. So thinking about those privacy and ethical considerations, and then you can look at a variety of different outcomes as well. Anytime you think of questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is here, joshua.duncan@usis.edu.
Thank you for watching today's Teaching with Technology Brown Bag. You can view all Teaching with Technology Brown Bags on the USU YouTube channel under the full ETI playlist. Have a nice day.